My fiancée demanded I pay her parents' $500,000 debt or she'd leave me, so I agreed, then discovered she was already married and planning to disappear with the money 48 hours after our wedding. I should have trusted my instincts the moment Sophia chose Maria for this conversation. I'm a corporate consultant who specializes in business restructuring, and after 12 years of analyzing failing companies, I've learned that people reveal their true intentions through their choices. Sophia had insisted on this upscale Boston restaurant, claiming she wanted somewhere special to discuss our future, but now I understood she'd picked the most expensive place possible to soften the blow of what she was about to ask. Ethan, I need to tell you something important about my family, she said, swirling her $18 glass of wine with practiced elegance. I set down my fork, watching her face carefully. After 18 months together, I'd learned to read her tells. The way she avoided direct eye contact when she was building up to something. The nervous laugh she used as punctuation when she felt uncertain about my reaction. The slight tremor in her voice that most people would mistake for vulnerability but I'd started recognizing as calculation. My parents are in serious financial trouble, she continued, her voice dropping to that intimate tone she used when she wanted my complete attention. Dad's real estate investments went south during the market downturn, and Mom's cancer treatments weren't fully covered by insurance. They're facing bankruptcy, Ethan. We're talking about losing their house, their retirement savings, everything. I nodded sympathetically, doing the mental math she probably expected me to do. Her parents lived in a beautiful colonial in Lexington worth at least $800,000. Her mother drove a Mercedes, her father a BMW. They took annual European vacations and had mentioned their wine collection more than once. If they were truly facing financial ruin, the lifestyle math didn't add up. How much are we talking about? I asked, though something in her expression told me I already knew this was going to be astronomical. $500,000, she said, watching my face intently for any reaction. I know it sounds like an impossible amount, but they need it within 6 weeks or they'll lose everything. The house, their dignity, their ability to ever recover from this. 6 weeks. Exactly the timeline until our wedding. The timing felt less like coincidence and more like choreography. I'd been in enough boardrooms to recognize when someone was presenting a carefully rehearsed proposal disguised as an emotional crisis. Sophia, that's a substantial amount of money, I said carefully. Have they explored other options? Bank loans, refinancing, selling assets. Her laugh had that nervous edge again. You think we haven't tried everything else first? Banks won't touch them with their current debt-to-income ratio. They've already sold Mom's jewelry, Dad's boat, everything valuable they owned. This isn't some casual request, Ethan. This is about keeping my family from losing everything they've worked their entire lives to build. She reached across the table to take my hand, her engagement ring catching the restaurant's ambient lighting. The ring I'd spent 3 months' salary on because she'd mentioned loving princess cuts. I wouldn't ask if there was any other way. But you're the only person in our lives with the resources to help them. You're going to be their son-in-law in 6 weeks. They're going to be your family too. The emotional manipulation was textbook perfect. Family obligation, time pressure, positioning me as the hero who could save the day. But what bothered me most was how rehearsed it all felt. The way she'd practiced emphasizing certain words, the strategic pauses, the perfectly timed hand squeeze. This wasn't a desperate daughter pleading for help. This was a presentation designed to extract maximum financial commitment with minimum resistance. I understand this is a lot to process, she said when I didn't immediately respond. But I need to know that you're completely committed to us, to our future together. This is about more than money, Ethan. This is about proving that you're ready to be part of our family, that you'll be there when we need you most. And there it was. The ultimatum disguised as a loyalty test. Pay up or lose me. Prove your love through your bank account. I'd seen this tactic used by failing companies trying to extract emergency funding from investors. Present the crisis as urgent and unavoidable, frame the payment as an investment in the relationship, make the target feel guilty for even hesitating. Let me think about this, I said finally. $500,000 is a significant decision. I need to review my finances, understand the full situation, Figure out the best way to structure something like this. Her smile flickered for just a moment, revealing something cold underneath the surface. She'd expected either immediate agreement or complete refusal, not practical analysis. Of course, she said, recovering quickly. I just hope you understand how time-sensitive this is. Every day we wait makes their situation worse. I'd hate for your parents-in-law to think their future son-in-law didn't care enough to help when they needed it most. I signed the check and walked her to her car, my mind already shifting into the analytical mode that had made me successful in corporate consulting. Something about this entire situation felt orchestrated, from the venue choice to the emotional manipulation to the convenient timing. And if there was one thing I'd learned from 12 years of investigating failing businesses, it was that when the numbers don't add up and the story feels too perfect, you dig deeper before you sign anything. I spent the next morning doing what I do best, investigating discrepancies until the truth emerged. I started with social media, scrolling through her mother's Instagram account while drinking my coffee and reviewing quarterly reports for a client in Detroit. What I found made my analytical instincts scream warning signals. 3 days ago, the same week Sophia claimed her mother couldn't afford groceries due to their financial crisis, Mrs. Patterson had posted photos from a wine-tasting weekend in Napa Valley. Expensive wine, 5-star resort, captions about treating ourselves to the finer things in life. I screenshotted everything, then moved to her father's LinkedIn profile. According to his recent activity, he'd been congratulating colleagues on new business ventures and sharing articles about luxury real estate markets. Not exactly the behavior of someone facing imminent bankruptcy. I called my college roommate Mike, who now worked as a private investigator in Boston. I need a favor, I said, explaining the situation without revealing too many personal details. Can you run a basic financial background check? Something's not adding up here. Give me 48 hours, Mike said. If there are public records, liens, bankruptcy filings, I'll find them. While waiting for Mike's report, I decided to drive past the Pattersons' house in Lexington. I told myself I was just being thorough, but honestly, I needed to see their situation with my own eyes. The Colonial looked exactly as I remembered from previous visits, perfectly maintained landscaping, fresh paint, no signs of financial distress. But what caught my attention was the brand-new Audi Q7 in the driveway. Sophia had mentioned her father selling his BMW to cover debts, yet here was an even more expensive vehicle parked where the BMW used to be. I sat in my car across the street, feeling like a detective in some financial crime thriller. The pieces weren't fitting together, and my experience restructuring companies had taught me that when people lie about money, they usually lie about everything else too. Mike called me Thursday evening with results that made my blood run cold. Your future in-laws aren't in financial trouble, he said without preamble. In fact, they're doing quite well. No bankruptcy filings, no liens, no outstanding judgments. Their credit scores are actually above average. But here's where it gets interesting. I ran a routine background check on your fiancée for wedding insurance purposes, and something came up that you need to know about immediately. I felt my stomach drop. What kind of something? Ethan, she's already married. Legal marriage certificate filed in Clark County, Nevada, 8 months ago. Husband's name is David Chin. According to the records, they're still legally married right now. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I sat down heavily in my home office chair, staring at the financial projections on my computer screen while trying to process what Mike had just told me. Married. For 8 months. While she'd been planning our wedding, choosing flowers, tasting cakes, registering for gifts. Are you absolutely certain? I asked, though I knew Mike didn't make mistakes about legal documents. I pulled the certificate myself. David Chin, 32 years old, occupation listed as business consultant. They were married at one of those quick chapel places in Vegas. The marriage is definitely still active. There's no divorce filing on record anywhere. I thanked Mike and hung up, then sat in my office for an hour trying to understand what this meant. The woman I'd been engaged to for 6 months was legally married to someone else. The woman asking me for $500,000 to save her parents from a financial crisis that didn't exist. The woman who'd positioned our relationship as the most important thing in her life was living a complete lie. I opened my laptop and started researching David Chin, using the investigative skills I'd developed tracking corporate fraud. What I found made me realize I wasn't just dealing with a lying fiancé. I was dealing with something much more sophisticated and dangerous. David Chen had multiple social media profiles, all carefully curated to show a lifestyle of luxury travel and business success. But when I dug deeper into the metadata and cross-referenced locations, I noticed something disturbing. Many of his photos were taken at the same hotels and restaurants where Sophia had posted pictures during times when she'd told me she was traveling for work or visiting friends. They weren't just married on paper. They were actively traveling together while she maintained our relationship as a cover story. The realization hit me like a financial audit gone catastrophically wrong. This wasn't just infidelity. This was something organized, something calculated. I was being conned by professionals, and they were good enough at it that I'd almost fallen for their $500,000 exit strategy. I poured myself a scotch and started making a list of everything I knew, everything I suspected, and everything I needed to prove. Because if Sophia and David thought they could manipulate a corporate restructuring specialist who'd spent 12 years investigating fraud, they'd seriously underestimated their mark. I called Mike back the next morning with a specific request that would either confirm my worst suspicions or prove I was paranoid about a simple case of bigamy. I need you to dig deeper into David Chen and Sophia. Look for patterns, other relationships, anything that suggests this isn't their first rodeo. What Mike uncovered over the next week made me realize I wasn't just dealing with marriage fraud. I was dealing with a sophisticated long-con operation that had been running for years across multiple states. "Ethan, you need to sit down for this," Mike said when he called with his findings. "David and Sophia aren't just married. They're running an elaborate romance scam targeting financially successful men through dating apps and social media. I found evidence of at least 6 previous victims across 4 states, all following the exact same pattern you're experiencing." He sent me a detailed report that read like something from a financial crimes textbook. The pattern was sickeningly consistent. Sophia would target men through elite dating apps, focusing on professionals with visible wealth indicators. She'd build relationships over 12 to 18 months, get engaged, then create family financial emergencies requiring large sums of money. The amounts varied based on the victim's apparent net worth, ranging from $200,000 to $800,000. Each time, the crisis would be positioned as temporary, urgent, and family-related. Medical bills, business emergencies, tax problems, real estate losses. Always something that tugged at emotional heartstrings while demanding immediate financial action. "Here's the disturbing part," Mike continued. "They typically disappear within 48 to 72 hours after getting the money. Sometimes they stage breakups, sometimes they just vanish. In 3 cases, they went through with fake wedding ceremonies, collected money as wedding gifts, then disappeared during the honeymoon. The wedding venues, photographers, caterers were all booked under false names and paid for with victim funds." I felt sick as Mike read me testimonials from previous victims. A software engineer in Austin who lost $450,000 to David and Sophia's fake business emergency. A doctor in Denver who paid $600,000 for Sophia's mother's supposed heart surgery, only to discover the mother was perfectly healthy and living under a different name in Phoenix. A real estate developer in Miami who handed over $800,000 for family tax problems, then watched Sophia disappear the day after their wedding ceremony while he was waiting for her at the airport for their honeymoon flight. "The Miami victim is particularly relevant," Mike said. "They used almost identical documentation to what I'm seeing in your case. Same fake medical records, same bankruptcy paperwork, even the same family photos. They're using a template, Ethan. You're victim number 7 in a proven system." The most chilling detail was how they'd researched me specifically. Mike found evidence that they'd been tracking my social media, my professional achievements, my estimated income based on public corporate filings. They knew exactly how much I was worth before Sophia ever matched with me on that dating app 18 months ago. Our entire relationship had been a calculated business transaction designed to extract maximum value from my bank accounts. "There's more," Mike said grimly. I tracked down 2 of the previous victims who were willing to talk. They both mentioned that Sophia would disappear for days at a time during the relationship, claiming work trips or family visits. Those were actually scouting trips to identify and cultivate new marks. While she was engaged to you, she was probably already working on victim number 8. I thought about all the times Sophia had traveled for her marketing job, all the conferences and client meetings that kept her away for long weekends. How she'd always be exhausted when she returned, claiming work stress but never wanting to discuss details. Now I understood she'd been running multiple cons simultaneously, maintaining emotional relationships with several men while married to David and planning to rob us all. The wedding venue suddenly made perfect sense too. Sophia had insisted on a destination wedding at a resort in the Berkshires, claiming she wanted something intimate and romantic away from the city. But Mike's research revealed that all their previous cons had used remote locations, making it easier to disappear quickly after obtaining the money. Our honeymoon trip to Europe wasn't a romantic getaway. It was their planned escape route to a non-extradition country where they could access offshore accounts and disappear permanently with $500,000 of my money. The timeline fits perfectly, Mike explained. Based on the pattern from previous cons, they collect the emergency money 2 to 6 weeks before the wedding, then disappear within 48 hours after the ceremony. Your wedding is in 5 weeks. If you'd paid the $500,000 when she asked, you'd have exactly the right timing for them to execute their exit strategy. I sat in my office reviewing Mike's evidence, feeling a strange mix of rage and professional admiration. From a purely analytical perspective, their operation was impressively thorough. They'd identified a lucrative market, developed a repeatable system, and executed it with precision across multiple jurisdictions. If they'd applied this level of planning and attention to detail to legitimate business ventures, they probably could have made more money legally. But they'd made one critical error in their victim selection process. They'd targeted someone who investigated fraud for a living, someone who understood exactly how to document evidence, trace financial patterns, and build cases that would hold up in court. As I started planning my next move, I realized David and Sophia were about to learn that conning a corporate restructuring specialist was like trying to embezzle from an accountant during tax season. They'd picked the wrong mark, and I was going to make sure they paid for every dollar they'd stolen from every victim who'd trusted them. I spent the weekend developing a counter-strategy that would have made my corporate clients proud. Instead of confronting Sophia directly or simply calling off the wedding, I decided to give her exactly what she wanted while documenting everything she did with it. The goal wasn't just to protect my money, it was to build an airtight case that would shut down their entire operation and get justice for every previous victim. Monday morning, I called my attorney, Patricia Williams, who specialized in financial crimes and had worked with federal prosecutors on several high-profile fraud cases. "Patricia, I need your help with something unusual," I said, explaining the situation while she took detailed notes. "I want to cooperate with law enforcement to catch these people in the act, but I need guarantees that I won't lose my money in the process." Patricia listened carefully, then made a call to a contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Within hours, I was sitting in a conference room with Special Agent Rodriguez, who told me this was exactly the kind of case they'd been hoping to build against organized romance fraud rings. "Mr. Thompson, what you're describing fits the profile of a sophisticated operation we've been tracking for 2 years," Agent Rodriguez explained. "We have reports from victims across multiple states, but we've never had someone willing and able to cooperate from the inside while the crime was in progress. With your help, we can not only recover your money but potentially shut down their entire network." The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. I would agree to pay Sophia's $500,000 demand, but the money would be transferred through a federal monitoring system that allowed complete tracking and instant reversal. Every transaction would be recorded, every communication documented, every movement traced. More importantly, they'd equip me with recording devices to capture Sophia's admissions about the fraud. "The key is letting them believe they've succeeded," Agent Rodriguez explained. "We need them to incriminate themselves completely before we make arrests. Based on your evidence about their timeline, they'll try to disappear within 48 hours after your wedding. That's when we'll have them." I agreed to wear recording equipment during all interactions with Sophia, particularly when discussing the money transfer and wedding plans. The FBI would monitor everything in real time, ready to intervene if the situation became dangerous or if they tried to leave earlier than expected. Patricia handled the legal documentation to ensure my cooperation would be protected under federal whistleblower statutes. "Ethan, I have to ask," Agent Rodriguez said as we wrapped up the meeting, "are you emotionally prepared for this? You're going to have to maintain a relationship with someone who's been lying to you for 18 months, someone who sees you as nothing more than a source of income. That's psychologically demanding even for someone with your analytical background." I thought about the other victims, the software engineer who'd lost his startup capital, the doctor who'd been manipulated through fake medical emergencies, the real estate developer abandoned at the airport on what should have been his honeymoon. "Agent Rodriguez, I've spent 12 years helping companies recover from people who thought they could steal without consequences. This is just a more personal version of the same thing. I can handle it." That evening, I called Sophia and delivered the performance of my life. "I've been thinking about what you said at dinner," I told her, making my voice sound slightly strained, like someone wrestling with a difficult decision. "About your parents, about proving my commitment to our family. I want to help." The relief in her voice was audible, probably mixed with excitement about how smoothly their con was progressing. "Oh, Ethan, thank you so much. I knew you'd come through for us. My parents are going to be so grateful, and honestly, this means everything to me about our future together. I'll need a few days to liquidate some investments and arrange the transfer," I said, following the script Agent Rodriguez and I had developed. "But I can have the money available by next Friday. Will that work for their timeline?" "That's perfect," she said quickly. "Too quickly. I'll let them know right away. They're going to be so relieved. You're literally saving their lives, their entire future." As I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and disgust. Satisfaction that the trap was working exactly as planned. Disgust that she could manipulate people's emotions so casually, turning love and trust into tools for theft. The recording equipment would be installed in my apartment and office the next day, and Agent Rodriguez would position surveillance teams to monitor both Sophia and David's activities leading up to the wedding. If everything went according to plan, they'd incriminate themselves completely while believing they were just days away from disappearing with $500,000. What they didn't realize was that instead of escaping to Europe with my money, they'd be taking a much longer trip to federal prison with a very different kind of accommodations waiting for them. The morning of my wedding arrived with perfect October weather in the Berkshires, exactly the kind of picturesque day Sophia had envisioned for her final con. What she didn't know was that every vendor at our ceremony had been replaced with undercover federal agents, and the romantic mountain resort she'd chosen for our intimate celebration had been transformed into the most elaborate sting operation in Massachusetts' financial crimes history. I woke up in my suite wearing a wire that Agent Rodriguez had personally fitted the night before, knowing that everything I said and did for the next 12 hours would be recorded as evidence. The irony wasn't lost on me that on what should have been the happiest day of my life, I was essentially working as an undercover agent to catch my own bride committing federal crimes. "You ready for this, Mr. Thompson?" Agent Rodriguez asked through my earpiece as I adjusted my tie. The Real wedding party was safely relocated to a secure location 50 miles away, replaced by FBI agents who'd spent weeks learning their roles. My best man was actually Agent Martinez from the Financial Crimes Unit, and even the officiant was a federal prosecutor who'd volunteered for the assignment. Sophia looked stunning in her $8,000 wedding dress, paid for with money she'd manipulated from our joint wedding account. She radiated the confident glow of someone who believed she was hours away from financial freedom, completely oblivious that she was actually walking into federal custody. "You look amazing," I told her, and for a moment, I almost forgot that everything about our relationship had been a lie. She'd been so convincing, so perfectly calibrated to seem like the ideal partner, that even knowing the truth, I could understand how she'd fooled 6 previous victims. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," she whispered during the processional, squeezing my hand with what seemed like genuine emotion. "After today, everything changes for us." She had no idea how right she was, just not in the way she imagined. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly, with Agent Martinez delivering a best man speech that was actually a coded signal to surveillance teams positioned throughout the resort. As Sophia and I exchanged vows that meant nothing to her and everything to the federal case building against her, I watched her face carefully for any signs that she suspected the elaborate setup surrounding her. But she was completely focused on the performance, playing the role of blissful bride while mentally counting down the hours until her planned disappearance. During the cocktail hour, I spotted David Chin among the wedding guests, exactly as the FBI had predicted. He was posing as her marketing colleague from work, maintaining careful distance while monitoring the situation. What he didn't realize was that agents had been tracking his every movement for weeks, documenting his role in coordinating their escape plans and managing their offshore financial accounts. The reception dinner gave me the opportunity to capture their most incriminating conversations. As planned, Sophia excused herself to powder her nose, giving me the chance to follow and record her phone conversation with David about their next steps. "Everything's perfect," I heard her say through the bathroom door. "He transferred the money this morning, just like the others. We'll be in Switzerland by Thursday with enough to disappear permanently." David's voice was clearly audible through my recording equipment. This one was almost too easy. Corporate guys always think they're too smart to be conned, but they're just as desperate and lonely as the rest. Did you see his face during the vows? He actually believes this is real. Their laughter felt like ice water in my veins, but I maintained my composure, knowing that every word was being captured by federal surveillance equipment. These recordings would not only convict them but provide closure for every previous victim who'd wondered whether their love had ever been real. The moment I'd been waiting for came during the reception toasts. Sophia stood up with champagne in hand, preparing to deliver what she believed would be her final performance before disappearing forever. "To my wonderful husband," she said, her voice carrying perfectly to the recording equipment, "thank you for proving that true love means being there when your partner needs you most. When my family faced their crisis, you didn't hesitate to help. That's how I know we're meant to be together forever." The guests applauded, completely unaware that they were witnessing a master manipulator celebrating her successful extraction of $500,000 from another victim. But as Sophia raised her champagne glass in triumph, Agent Rodriguez gave the signal I'd been waiting for all day. "FBI. Nobody move." The ballroom erupted as agents revealed themselves, surrounding both Sophia and David with drawn weapons and federal arrest warrants. The look of shock and terror on Sophia's face as she realized her perfect con had become a federal trap was worth every minute of psychological torture I'd endured over the past month. "Sophia Patterson and David Chin, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering," Agent Rodriguez announced as handcuffs clicked into place. "You have the right to remain silent, though I should mention that we already have everything we need thanks to your cooperative partner here." David's face went white as he realized I'd been working with law enforcement. "This is impossible," Sophia screamed, looking at me with pure hatred as the reality of her situation finally sank in. "You can't do this to me. We're married." "Actually, you're married to him," I said, nodding toward David as agents led them both away in handcuffs. "I was just the mark who happened to be smarter than you calculated." As federal agents secured the crime scene and began processing evidence, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. I just watched my fiancée get arrested at our own wedding for trying to steal $500,000 from me as part of a multi-state romance scam operation. It wasn't exactly the wedding day I'd dreamed about, but seeing justice served felt better than any honeymoon could have. The trial became a media sensation 6 months later, with prosecutors presenting what they called the most comprehensive romance fraud case in federal court history. I testified as the key witness, describing how my background in corporate restructuring had helped me recognize the sophisticated financial manipulation tactics Sophia and David employed across multiple states. The courtroom was packed with journalists, legal experts, and several of their previous victims who'd flown in to watch justice finally being served. "Mr. Thompson," the lead prosecutor asked during my testimony, "can you explain how your professional experience helped you identify the defendant's fraudulent scheme?" I looked directly at Sophia, sitting at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit that was a far cry from her designer wedding dress. "In my work restructuring failing companies, I've learned to recognize when financial narratives don't match observable reality. When someone claims bankruptcy but displays wealth, when emergency timelines coincidentally align with major financial transactions, when emotional manipulation replaces logical business discussions. The defendants were running their romance scam like a poorly managed corporation, and the red flags were obvious once you knew what to look for. The evidence Agent Rodriguez and his team had gathered was overwhelming. They'd recovered detailed records of the entire operation from David's encrypted laptop, including victim profiles, financial targets, timeline spreadsheets, and even script templates for manufacturing family emergencies. The FBI had traced stolen funds across 7 different offshore accounts, documenting how Sophia and David had systematically defrauded dozens of men out of more than $4.2 million over 3 years. One of the most damaging pieces of evidence was the recording I'd captured at our wedding reception, where Sophia and David had bragged about how easy it was to manipulate desperate, lonely men who thought they were too smart to be conned. The jury listened to their callous laughter as they discussed their planned escape to Switzerland, completely oblivious that federal agents were recording every word. But the testimony that affected me most deeply came from their previous victims. Marcus Webb, the software engineer from Austin, described how losing $450,000 to their fake business emergency had destroyed not only his startup dreams but his ability to trust anyone romantically. Dr. Jennifer Martinez from Denver explained how paying $600,000 for Sophia's mother's supposed heart surgery had forced her to close her private practice and declare personal bankruptcy. Robert Chin, the real estate developer from Miami, broke down on the witness stand describing how he'd waited alone at the airport for a honeymoon flight that never came, slowly realizing that his new wife and $800,000 had vanished forever. "Your Honor," he said through tears, "they didn't just steal my money. They stole my faith in love, in marriage, in my ability to judge people's character. I haven't been able to date anyone since. I don't trust my own judgment anymore." Their testimonies made me realize how fortunate I'd been to discover the scam before losing more than money. These people had been psychologically devastated, left questioning not just their financial decisions but their fundamental understanding of human relationships. The defense attorneys tried to portray Sophia and David as victims of circumstance, claiming financial desperation had driven them to make poor choices. But prosecutor Sarah Mitchell demolished that narrative with evidence of their lavish lifestyle funded entirely by victim money. She showed the jury photos of their luxury vacations, expensive cars, designer clothes, and high-end electronics, all purchased while they were telling Marks about family medical emergencies and business failures. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Mitchell said in her closing argument, "the defendants didn't commit these crimes out of desperation. They committed them out of greed, arrogance, and complete disregard for the emotional and financial devastation they caused. They turned love into a weapon and trust into a commodity. They represent the worst kind of predators, those who exploit people's capacity for genuine affection." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts of wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and money laundering, I felt a satisfaction deeper than any corporate victory I'd ever achieved. Sophia received 15 years in federal prison, while David got 20 years as the operations mastermind. Judge Roberts made it clear during sentencing that he was sending a message about romance fraud. The defendants operated a sophisticated criminal enterprise that preyed on people's most basic human need for love and connection, he said. They turned the promise of marriage into a weapon for financial theft. Their crimes have caused immeasurable damage not just to bank accounts, but to victims' ability to trust, to love, to believe in the possibility of genuine human connection. This court will not tolerate such calculated cruelty. As I watched them being led away in shackles, I felt no satisfaction in their personal destruction, only relief that they couldn't hurt anyone else. The FBI had recovered over $3.1 million in stolen funds through asset forfeiture, allowing significant restitution payments to previous victims. Several of them approached me after sentencing to thank me for having the courage and resources to fight back when they couldn't. 6 months after Sophia and David's sentencing, I found myself in an unexpected role as an advocate for romance scam awareness, speaking at financial literacy conferences and helping law enforcement agencies identify similar operations across the country. The experience had taught me that my analytical skills weren't just valuable in corporate restructuring. They could help protect vulnerable people from sophisticated predators who weaponized human emotion for profit. The FBI invited me to consult on their financial crimes task force, reviewing cases where romance fraud intersected with complex money laundering schemes. Agent Rodriguez told me that our successful prosecution had become a template for investigating organized romance fraud rings, with law enforcement agencies using our documentation methods to build stronger cases against similar operations. "Ethan, what you did changed how we approach these crimes," he explained during one of our consulting sessions. "Before this case, romance fraud was treated as individual incidents of theft. Now we understand it's often organized crime that requires the same investigative techniques we use for drug cartels or terrorism financing." I'd also started dating again, cautiously but with much better boundaries and awareness of manipulation tactics. Meeting Rebecca through a colleague's dinner party felt refreshingly normal after 18 months of manufactured romance with Sophia. Rebecca was a pediatric surgeon who appreciated directness over gameplaying, someone who insisted on splitting every check and found my analytical nature reassuring rather than boring. "I like that you ask questions about everything," she told me during our third date. "Most guys I've dated just accept whatever I tell them at face value. You actually want to understand how things work, why people make decisions, what motivates behavior. It makes me feel like you're really paying attention." The contrast with Sophia couldn't have been more stark. Where Sophia had discouraged questions about her work, her family, her financial situation, Rebecca welcomed curiosity and offered detailed answers about her surgical cases, her research interests, her long-term career goals. Where Sophia had created artificial emergencies to test my commitment, Rebecca demonstrated her independence by handling her own problems and asking for help only when it made logical sense. Most importantly, where Sophia had seen my success as something to exploit, Rebecca viewed it as something we could build on together. The psychological recovery took longer than I'd expected. Even knowing that Sophia had been acting throughout our entire relationship, part of me still mourned the loss of what I'd believed we had together. Dr. Patricia Williams, the therapist I'd started seeing after the trial, explained that this was normal for fraud victims. "You weren't just betrayed by a person," she said. "You were betrayed by your own judgment, your ability to read people accurately. That's why romance fraud is so psychologically damaging. It makes victims question their fundamental capacity to distinguish between authentic and manipulative relationships." The therapy helped me understand that my analytical skills, while protective in many ways, had also made me vulnerable to someone sophisticated enough to present false data convincingly. Sophia and David had succeeded initially because they'd crafted their lies with the same attention to detail that I used in corporate investigations. They'd anticipated my questions and prepared plausible answers, making their fraud nearly undetectable until I'd expanded my investigation beyond their carefully constructed narrative. A year later, I received a letter from Marcus Webb, the software engineer who'd lost his startup capital to Sophia and David's con. He'd used his portion of the restitution funds to launch a new company focused on fraud detection software, specifically targeting romance scams on dating platforms. "Your courage to fight back inspired me to turn my experience into something positive," he wrote. "I realized that my understanding of how these scams work from the victim's perspective could help protect others. We're launching next month with backing from 3 major dating apps who want to integrate our detection algorithms." Reading his letter, I realized that surviving Sophia and David's con had taught me something valuable about resilience and justice. The experience hadn't made me cynical about relationships or paranoid about people's motives. Instead, it had sharpened my ability to distinguish between authentic emotional connection and sophisticated manipulation, between genuine vulnerability and calculated performance. I still plan carefully for the future, still analyze risks and rewards, still trust my analytical instincts about people's behavior. But now I also trust my emotional instincts in ways I never did before, understanding that the best protection against manipulation isn't emotional detachment but emotional intelligence combined with practical skepticism. Rebecca and I are planning to move in together next month, A decision we've discussed thoroughly and approached with the kind of careful consideration that Sophia once criticized as unromantic. But Rebecca appreciates the security that comes from dating someone who thinks ahead, who asks the right questions, who understands that real love involves building something sustainable rather than just feeling something intense. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't discovered Sophia's scam in time, if I'd handed over the $500,000 and watched her disappear to Europe with David and my money. I probably would have spent years questioning my judgment, wondering if I'd somehow driven away the woman I thought I loved, never knowing that our entire relationship had been an elaborate theft disguised as romance. Instead, I helped send 2 professional criminals to federal prison, recovered millions of dollars for their victims, and learned that the best relationships are built on transparency rather than manipulation, on mutual respect rather than financial exploitation. The analytical skills that made me successful in corporate restructuring also made me capable of dismantling a sophisticated fraud operation and building something genuine with someone who actually deserved it.